Welcome, everyone. My name is Becky Robinson, and I'm so thrilled to be joined by Karin Hurt and David Dye today for our last installment of the Daily Connection. Next week, we are switching the name and the frequency. We will be the Weekly Connection, meeting on Tuesdays at noon Eastern. And we're grateful for those of you who have joined us during this time of crisis as a place to connect and have some structure and positive learning. So welcome, Karin and David. How are you?
Oh, good. Thanks so much for having us.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So as you're coming in today, I hope you'll locate the chat. And as always, I want to invite you to engage with us in the chat throughout today's broadcast. We'd love to hear from you. We love your questions and your interaction. And why don't we get started with our daily prompt of what are you grateful for today? When I sent out the morning email today, the thing that I was thinking of most was the fact that it's Friday, and I'm looking forward to a different pace of life over the weekend, even though there isn't anything exciting on my social calendar. David and Karin, would you like to share something that you're grateful for today?
You know, one of the things that I've been really grateful for is all of the amazing connections of people from my past. I seem to be connecting with people more and more and more every single day. People are reaching out and I reach out, and just like even this, right? It's just so fun to catch up with people.
It sure is. David, do you want to share something?
And I'm going to go to the kitchen, and we've been baking a lot of bread and, just some of those family connection types of things that you don't always have time for. But this has created time. So that has been good as well.
That is wonderful. So Rob says that he's grateful in Delaware for a nice weekend forecast. And John, who happens to be in Illinois, is saying that he had a great conversation this morning with a new connection and great sunshine this morning. And Guy, hi Guy, how are you? He says as he connects with more people, he's grateful to see that they and their loved ones are okay. Jeff in Arizona is grateful for the arrival of family, moving to Arizona to shelter in place with them. So thanks to those of you who are sharing. I'm glad to see you here and glad that we have the chance to learn together. Karin and David, I realized that I have your script, but I didn't grab your formal bio. So I want to give you the chance to share with this audience exactly what you want them to know about the work you do in the world before we dive into the content.
Yeah, so Dave, we're a husband and wife team, and we run a international leadership development firm. So we do long-term training programs, we do keynote speaking, and we're doing a lot of live online training these days. We've actually been doing that for the last couple of years, but we're clearly in the process of transferring a lot of our face-to-face programs to live online as well. We've written a couple of books. First is Winning Well, A Manager's Guide to Getting Results Without Losing Your Soul. And we have a new book coming out that's what we want to talk about today, which is with HarperCollins, and it's called Courageous Cultures: How to Build Teams of Micro-Innovators, Problem Solvers, and Customer Advocates.
I love that. Thank you, Karin, for doing my job so well. And as it relates to the new book, can you let us know when it's coming? I'm sure that everyone will be curious.
Sure, yes, July 28th, the end of July. So pre-orders are available now, of course, and we'll give you where you can do all that. But we're looking forward to getting that. And there are lots of tools that are going to be coming out very shortly that you can take advantage of.
Perfect. Yeah, that is soon, Jane says. So we will be sharing some links throughout today's event so that you can find Karin and David around the web and pre-order the book. But for now, I want to remind you, if you would like to live tweet this session today, we are using the hashtag Daily Connection. Of course, that one's going to switch next week to Weekly Connection. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. We want to make sure, I know you have a lot of great value to share with our audiences today. So can you tell me, Karin and David, about the Courageous Cultures research? And why is it so critical right now?
Yeah, so when we were working with clients, we would go in and we'd be working at the very senior level, and we would hear things like, why don't people share their ideas? Why am I the only one who stumbles on these best practices? Why won't people speak up? And then we would be doing training at the frontline supervisor level in the same organization, and we would hear things like, nobody wants to hear my ideas. The last time I spoke up, I got in trouble. We thought, are you working in the same organization? So, leaders want to hear ideas, employees have ideas, and somehow it's getting lost. And so that was really what sparked this research question for us. And we partnered with the University of North Colorado on a fairly extensive research study to understand what was preventing people from speaking up. And when you had a more courageous organization where people were speaking up, down, and sideways, what were the key characteristics?
You know, one of the pain points that we saw is that you've got organizations that have so many good ideas and talented people, but they're not taking action on those, and the organizations aren't benefiting from them. So there's a cost that comes with that, the cost of, you know, lost customer. There's customer advocacy that could be happening. It is, you know, as we look at the world that we're entering into, the technology becomes a commodity. Artificial intelligence is more and more prominent. And at some point, the economy is going to recover. But even while it isn't, you've got competition for the talent that can do what's needed. And so one of the attractors for all of that is this ability to have everybody contributing at a strategic level. And if that's not happening, you're at a disadvantage to your competitors who are able to get everybody together and able to do that.
Yeah, when you think about why right now this is so vital, we are at a period of incredible micro-innovation, right? People are having to get very scrappy, doing what they can with what they have from where they are, and are innovating more rapidly than normal. And they're also being more open to new ways of doing things. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to lose all that, you know? So there's some nice momentum where people saying, oh, maybe we can do it this way. You know, my sister is actually running, doing a lot of the operations for a hospital right now as they're moving everything with, you know, to the COVID environment. And she said she's astounded at how fast the innovation is coming, you know, because usually things are so rule bound and bureaucratic, right? And she's like, it's great now because we're actually able to move fast.
And then you look at, you know, everything from associations to different corporations who are looking at, the deck has been so shuffled that they're looking at real fundamental things like, do we need that building that we're paying for? Are we going to go back to that building? Are we going to use less space and rotate through it? I mean, we've got health and safety concerns, but then we've got strategically what actually makes the most sense. And so in this period of disruption, it's also a chance to recreate whatever that new future looks like.
Certainly so. And I think as it relates to education and higher education, there are lots of questions about how life will get back to normal there. So in practically every sector, no matter what you do, there is a need right now to tap into those great ideas in our organizations. So I think we want to go to a poll. Is that right?
Yes.
All right.
Love to ask the question of everyone here. When you think of the best idea that has emerged from this crisis, either it's been on your team, or if you're a consultant with a client that you're working with, what was that idea about? The very best idea that has come in the last month or so, what was that idea about?
And so you'll see that I've put the poll up for you. It's the choices are improve efficiency in a process, improve employee performance, improve customer experience. We haven't had any good ideas emerge, or we've only silly ideas emerge that weren't worth much. And so we would love to hear from you. Now, if for some reason you can't see the poll today, I know sometimes folks have trouble with that, we would welcome your opinion or thoughts in the chat. And just as a reminder to use the drop-down menu so that everyone can see your thoughts. So I'm going to give you a few more seconds on that. And Karin, I think that's a really, really good question. And I've been trying to think about, I know that our team has had some good ideas, and creating this series was one of the good ideas that we had in the early days of the crisis. So I imagine this might be an improved customer experience idea, but I'm trying to think about what other ideas have emerged. Yikes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close up the poll. It looks like most of you who have answered or were going to answer have stopped, so I'll share those results. So this is what I see. 39% of the ideas that folks have seen during this period have been to improve customer experience. That's the biggest answer. So what do you think about these results, Karin and David?
They're very consistent with the research that we did. So one of the concerns that you'd occasionally hear from maybe a more insecure leader is like, oh yeah, I get all these ideas, but they're just going to be for things like, improving the break room or getting on tap kombucha in, which Karen's been lobbying for here at Let's Grow Leaders headquarters. But, but in reality, when we went to the research, we found out that the top 3 results were exactly what you said are the top 3 results: the efficiency in the processes, improving employee experiences, improving profitability, customer service, and the customer experience.
So that's what those ideas were, ideas that people were holding back. So they said, if I were to share an idea, it would be about one of those top 3 things. So that means that it's really important to ask.
Yes, I agree with you. So what do you think it is that keeps people from speaking up and solving more problems? So you referenced the fact that you talk to the frontline leaders, they would say, I have ideas, but I'm not sharing them. And what's standing in the way?
Yeah, so we're going to share a couple slides here to take you inside the research.
So the top reason, one of the ones that emerged immediately, is that people are not being asked for their ideas. In fact, 49% of the respondents said that they were not regularly asked for ideas. And so if you think about that, I recall a time where I had a situation that everybody who was spreadsheet oriented had come up with an answer. And fortunately, I went and asked one other person who was on the executive team but hadn't been a part of that decision-making process, who had a very people orientation. And she opened our eyes to a whole new solution. If I had not asked, I would never have received that answer. So what are we missing when we're not asking?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So the next reason that came up was nothing happens. So why bother if nothing's ever going to happen? In fact, 50% of our survey respondents said that the reason they are not speaking up is that because they don't think their idea would be taken seriously.
And then we've got me stuck in the snow here. So if you're ever feeling stuck in a rut, a huge number of folks said that, their leaders operate under the principle, this is, look, because we've always done it this way, and that's the way we're going to do it. 2/3, just over 2/3. So, there's definitely a rut thinking that happens there. And this is one of the advantages to disruption like this. As much as it stinks and as painful as it is, it also creates some of the help to get through that.
And then another main reason is people said, I'm scared to speak up. And so 40% of our survey respondents said, I just don't feel confident in sharing my ideas. And this comes from a variety of reasons. The first is what we're calling FOSU, fear of speaking up. And what we found is a lot of people said, I had a single bad experience with maybe a bullying boss or a toxic work environment. And that experience was enough to say, I'm not going to try it again. And it's interesting, Dr. Amy Edmondson, who is the author of the Fearless Organization, has done a lot of really good work in terms of psychological safety. And we're absolutely delighted that she wrote the foreword to our book. And she says, people will, it's called discounting the future, but people will say it's better for me to stay safe because I know that I'm thinking about how I feel today, and they underestimate the benefits that could happen from speaking up.
And overestimate the continued presence of whatever that bad experience was in the past and get anchored down.
Yeah, so in our book, we talk about the need for really focusing on making sure if you want a courageous culture, you have to first be sure that you are not tolerating any of the Me Too behaviors or the, a really high performing leader that is also leading in a very poor way. You can't have any of that if you want people to have the energy. If they have to come to work just getting the energy to fight a bully or fight a toxic environment, they are not going to have any energy for speaking up. So that's what the real paradox of a courageous culture is, that you actually need less daily courage to be successful.
The courage is in the culture. So it's because this is the way we do things. One of our favorite definitions of culture is Seth Godin's, people like us do things like this. And so if the cultural current is carrying us in the direction of we share, we contribute, we don't go to safe silence, we go to consistent contribution because that's what we do. And if it becomes easier to share than to remain silent and to hold back, the courage is in the culture, the individual isn't having to bring all of that. Now, you can help people to become more confident in how they share them.
That's really powerful to think about, that you're actually lessening stress for people when you create a culture that invites them to contribute in a comfortable environment.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how leaders can create this kind of culture. So how can we create a culture that promotes this idea of contribution instead of safe silence?
Yeah. So in our book, we take you through a 7-step process, and we don't have time to go through all of that today, but we thought we would just highlight a few, which, it absolutely starts with connection. And today more than ever, it's, having that empathetic connection with the human beings that you're working with. And we talk about the importance of navigating the narrative, navigating your own narrative around courage and FOSU, fear of speaking up, and we help people think through a process which we talk about. How do you do a courage map and think about your career and the times that you did speak up or the times that you were courageous, so that you can help tap into those to build the confidence for the future. So we have a couple of different processes around that.
And then one of the next steps is clarity. And so all of leadership comes back to clarity in so many different ways. But when we're talking about building a courageous culture, it's creating safety through clarity around strategy. What is it that success looks like? What are the behaviors I need to do every day to get there? But there's another aspect of clarity that's important, and that is, where do I most need a really good idea? And if leaders will have that clarity themselves and get really clear, you know what we could use? Right now, I could use every single possible idea on how to show up with connection with our customers virtually, with how to, raise our game in a situation where none of us can be in the same room. What is the idea that you most need? If you can get really clear around that, you can start to cultivate those ideas.
Yeah. And then so you're starting with connection, then you go to clarity, and then the next aspect is curiosity. And that's really showing up curious and asking people. So we talk about courageous questions and the power of courageous questions, which are asking questions that people have to respond in a brave way, right? So what is the one thing that is really ticking off our customers? Right? So you're not just saying, do you have any ideas how to improve the customer experience? What's the one thing? So it's a courageous question. It's very specific, and it's getting to something where you're really inviting them to share something vulnerable. What is one thing that I do as a manager that is frustrating you? Right? Those are some kinds of courageous questions. Another technique that we use is what we call a curiosity tour. And so we were working with one CEO, and he was a real clarity kind of CEO, right? He was always management by walking around and telling people how he thought things needed to be done. But he was in the middle of a new product launch that was not getting the traction that he needed. And so I said to him, what if for 1 week, you only show up curious about this, right? Stop telling people to work harder. Stop telling people what they're doing wrong. Just show up curious. So he's walking through his contact center, and he heard a rep on the phone talking to a customer, and she was clearly struggling. And he thought, oh, all right, I'm supposed to show up curious. What would I do if I showed up curious in this moment? So he asked the rep, could he talk to the customer? And he got on the phone and he introduced himself, and he said, hey, I'm the CEO here. My rep seems to be struggling answering your questions. What can I do to help? And then as he listened to the questions the customer was asking, he realized that they had in no way, shape, or form prepared the representatives to be able to answer that depth of questions. So that's an example of a curiosity tour. And then one final technique that, there's a bunch in the book, but one I really love this one, because I was on a walk with my sister, the one I was talking about earlier, who's working in a hospital. And she said, I think we do what you're talking about. And I said, what is that? And she said, well, we call it the patient experience. So in any given meeting, she said, if we're talking about something really strategic, we designate one person from that meeting to only act on behalf of the patient. So they take, like, say it was the director of IT's turn. That person is not allowed to talk IT during that meeting. They're just to have to think about what would a patient say. And so she said, we were implementing a new scheduling system. And it was also, the rehab people could see, see all the departments would be connected. And the patient raised his hand and said, I want to see my schedule too. And everybody went, ugh. that's, there's so much that could potentially go wrong with that. But he says, no, I get it won't be 100% right. But right now, I don't want my wife to be here all the time. That's not a good use of her time. But there are certain times when I'm going to get lab tests back or conversation with a doctor that I would like her to be here. So let's give us a fighting chance. And they did that. And they gave that transparency. And she said patient experience and the satisfaction scores of patient satisfaction have gone up so much. And she said that's just one unique example of how that patient experience has worked out.
So after you've cultivated that curiosity, you've asked for the ideas that you need, the final piece that we want to share in this time is what we call respond with regard. And this is a mistake that a lot of leaders make, is they may be soliciting ideas and asking for them, but they're not responding in a way that makes people want to keep bringing ideas. So, there's a couple different things that might happen. You might get an idea that's already been implemented. Well, can you say thank you and let them know and close that loop? Yeah, thanks for thinking about this. Here's where it's happening, and let's check it out. Maybe they brought an idea that was ill-formed or lacked information or wasn't strategically relevant. Can you share that information with them? Again, starting with a thank you. Really appreciate you thinking about this with us. Here's some additional information. Here's what else you might not have known that might be helpful to you, or some additional obstacles to overcome, and invite them back to the table. Can you continue thinking about that? I'd love to get your insights on this with this other information. And then finally, sometimes there are ideas that you may not be able to move forward with, and you can be upfront about why and help them to see strategically what might be more relevant. And then, of course, if there is a chance to implement the idea, to trial it, to start small, invite them to be a part of that process. But responding with regard, that act of embracing the fact that they took the time, had the courage to contribute something, to have that gratitude, and then respond appropriately from there. Those are some steps to help cultivate that courageous culture.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. So let's talk for a moment, because when you talk about responding with regard, I'm wondering how well I've done with that as a leader. So what would you say to a leader who gets overwhelmed by ideas, but they are those ideas that are bad ideas or not relevant to the organization? How can we do that sensitively?
Yeah, so Becky, you might be talking about an idea that sounds something like this.
Miss is all that's going on there. Now, Donna, you got quite the vent today. It sounds like what's going on with you.
Well, I wanted to voice my opinion on something that's been bothering me for a really long time.
Okay.
I tried writing the newspaper and contacting TV stations, but nobody seems to want to help me with this. So that's why I'm calling you guys.
What's the issue?
Well, over the past few years, I've been involved in 3 separate car accidents involving deer.
Mm-hmm.
With the population and everything. Each of these incidents, they've occurred shortly after I saw a deer crossing sign on the highway. Well, my frustration is that Minnesota and North Dakota Departments of Transportation would allow these deer crossings to be in such high traffic areas. I mean, I've even seen them on the interstate. Why are we encouraging deer to cross at the interstate? I don't get this, such a high traffic area.
All right, so we want to pause that take your time, but that is an actual real conversation that happened. And we called the radio station to get permission to use the clip and said, okay, tell us the truth. Was that set up or was that real? And they said, oh no, absolutely real.
So to answer,
that's funny.
So one of the things that you can do is to really help your people to say, what does a good idea look like? And so this is a process that we teach in our leadership development programs to help people vet their ideas. And so this is our idea model. And so you say, when you're teaching people how to bring ideas, say, okay, I hear you have a great idea. So here's what I want you to do. Tell me, why is this idea interesting? How does it solve a strategic problem? Or how will results be made better by the idea?
And then how is it doable? Is this something we can actually do? So is there something within our agency? If it requires us to change regulatory conditions that, out, and that's going to take 2 years, well, that might be work we can do, but what can we do that's within our purview right now?
And then, is it engaging? Like, who else would you need to involve to make it happen? And another way to think about engaging is we will often say, if you presented this idea in the meeting, would people be nodding along saying this is a great idea? And then the following.
Yeah, so to fully bake the idea, what are the next steps? How do you take action on it? What are the important actions that need to happen? And so with our deer crossing individual, you can at least say she was passionate and she cared. To help her with that, to say, hey, listen, here's some additional information. And now with this added information, can you come up with an idea that is within our agency that would actually solve the strategic problem, which people do want to have solved? Who needs to be involved and what are the next steps? And with that, you can craft real solutions that, when you share this story in other parts of the world who have more sophisticated animal control solutions, they go, well, yeah, you can do some other things about it. So as crazy and off base as the idea might sound, you can still cultivate more courage and more sharing of ideas that are going to matter.
So I love that. And I have a question here from Carol. She wants to know if you think that facilitated brainstorming sessions promote courage, and maybe you have some ideas about that.
Sure. Well, a couple things. The answer is it depends, but the bigger answer is it really depends on the culture that you've created. And in general, facilitated brainstorming, in order to work well, we find needs to start by a period of reflection. Here are a couple things that get in the way of brainstorming. Politics gets in the way of brainstorming. Groupthink gets in the way of brainstorming. So if you're going to use brainstorming, the facilitated word I think is important. Politics gets in the way because whoever has the title, the ego, the position, the status tends to dominate those discussions. The groupthink sets in where an idea gets thrown up and people automatically start responding to that idea. There are other ways that you can go about it, and there are a variety of techniques out there. But if you start with reflection, quietly having people write and then responding and then sorting the deck so that you take away status issues and you prevent groupthink, it absolutely is a way that you can start.
I know we only have 3 minutes, but I have to share the fear for it.
Do it.
Okay, so we have a technique that we use, and it was interesting. We always carry around just a deck of index cards, plain index cards with us. So we were working with a group of senior executives, and they were working on a really big strategic problem that they were working on. And the people who were in the room were all of the presidents of each one of their brands, and then the people who were in succession to be at that level. So pretty senior people. And I was watching this conversation. I'm like, something is wrong. So we gave everybody an index card, and on the top at front we said, H, tell us your biggest hope for this project, and F on the back, what is your biggest fear about this project? Now, the hopes were all the strategically aligned. Everybody was aligned with the hopes. That was not the big issue. The fears, every single one of them said, I do not trust that the people in this room are going to execute on what they say they're going to do. And I read, it was crazy. Every single one said that. I'm like, so here's the problem. If you don't think everybody's going to execute, how are you going to take this back and ask your teams to execute on this, right? So we had to deal with that conversation. And it would never have emerged if we hadn't done that in a publicly anonymous way. So
that's a really powerful story. So I want to make sure that we have your calls to action up on the screen since we are running out of time. And Joanne is saying thank you for a valuable session and that she's going to miss these. Me too. I'm going to miss these too, but we will be back together every Tuesday at noon. And so to learn more from Karin and David, make sure you check out courageousculturesbook.com. I hear there's a new website coming there soon with a lot of great information. And you can also register for a free idea day. No?
Yes.
Okay.
Like you were switching the slide.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So register for the free Idea Day Summit on July 23rd. And you can do that at letsgrowleaders.com idea-day. All of this will be in your follow-up email that you're going to get early next week. We are going to shift from a daily email to a twice a week email just to remind you about each weekly session. But I have been learning and from David and Karin for many years. I hope you'll choose to do the same. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to just turn it back to you, Karin and David, for last words of encouragement or inspiration for our group today.
We would say, be the courageous leader you want your boss to be.